Hi friends, hope that you're doing good. I hope you're having a good weekend. Maybe you might be watching this on the long weekend, and if you are, I hope you're having a great time with friends, family, whoever you're able to connect with. And of course, we'd love to connect with you if you're in town on Sunday at Latcham Hall. Okay, so we're finishing, we're getting close to, we have one more week in our parable series. But we're getting close to finishing our parable series, and today we're talking about the parable that Jesus told, the story about the prodigal son. The story is found in Luke chapter 15, and I think it's helpful for us to see this story in the context of the larger chapter, because it kind of is all tied together with other things that Jesus said in Luke chapter 15. So, at the beginning of Luke 15, we're told that some religious leaders were complaining about people that Jesus was hanging around with, right? No surprise, they were complaining he was hanging around with notorious sinners. And in Luke 15, verse 1, says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people and even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. Okay, so Jesus responds to their complaints with actually three different stories. And the third story is the story of the prodigal son. But again, I think it's helpful for us to see the prodigal son in the context of the first two stories, in the context of this whole chapter. So three stories, third, prodigal son. The first story that Jesus told was of a shepherd who had 100 sheep, and he lost one of them. And in verse 4, he says that he left the 99 other sheep, and he went out to search for the lost sheep. There was action associated with that. And then in verse 6, he talks about the joy, rejoicing when he found the sheep. And then in verse 7, he talks about, like, from heaven's perspective, right? There is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over the 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away, okay? So these themes, first of all, of searching for the lost sheep, of joy over finding them, and then from heaven's perspective. And then to kind of put an exclamation mark on those points, Jesus tells another story using the same points. In verses 8 to 10, he tells the story of a woman who's searching for her lost coin. And in verse 8, talks about searching the house. Again, there's action associated with it. Verse 9, rejoicing with her friends when she finds it. And then in verse 10, again, from heaven's perspective, there's joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. Okay, so you see these common themes that are found in this first two story. And the overarching point of the first two stories is that Jesus and God, but Jesus seeks out those who are far from him. Jesus seeks out people who are not currently oriented towards him. And also the second kind of overarching idea is that there's tremendous joy in heaven when somebody turns towards Jesus and takes steps towards him, right? The angels in heaven are like, having a party when that happens. And that's not just for, I'm going to pause there because I'm going to come back and talk about what I was about to say at the end of our time together. Okay, so religious leaders are complaining, those people that Jesus hangs around with, notorious sinners. And Jesus responds by telling three stories. The first two, the shepherd and the woman who lost the coin, and rejoicing and all of that. And then in verse 11, Jesus transitions, and it says in verse 11, to illustrate the point further, Jesus told another story. Okay, so this is connected to the first two stories that he told. And he goes on to say, a man had two sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. Ouch! Can I just pause there for a moment? if Brady said to me, I want your share, I want my money now before you die, how harsh is that? And how painful would that be, right? So just to put an exclamation mark on how harsh that is. I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son, packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I'll go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.'" So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son. Hear the action there? Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him and kissed him. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son." But his father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with the feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found." And listen, I love this. And so the party began. And so the party began. And then verses 25 to 32 go on to talk about the older brother's response to the returning of the younger brother. And like the Pharisees, the older brother just couldn't wrap his head around this idea of forgiveness. But we're not going to really talk too much about that. Okay, I want to first of all begin by just kind of drawing attention to something that I think is easy to misunderstand. The son, he gets his money, he goes off and lives a wild life for a little while, and then he hits rock bottom, right? He had to feed the pigs, and remember, Jesus is speaking to a Jewish audience here, and so for the Jewish audience, anything associated with pigs is very, very low, right? And so he's been reduced to having to feed the pigs. In fact, he's so hungry that the food the pigs are eating looks good to him, but nobody will give him anything, right? The guy's starving, can't even eat the food that the pigs are eating. So this is an image for Jesus's Jewish audience that this guy has absolutely hit rock bottom, right? There's no lower that he can go. And the inference is, and this is easy to misunderstand, the inference is that, those who have maybe walked away from God, or maybe those who are not living connected with Jesus, are living this kind of rock bottom life and, kind of feeding pigs, or whatever, right? But the problem is that my friends, when I think about my friends who are not followers of Jesus, they are lovely people, wonderful, lovely people. They're good, moral, solid citizens, right? And they're enjoying their life, right? Most of them, are just really, they're doing well in life, and they have no complaints, right? And so this idea that, if you're not following Jesus, then you're going to be at rock bottom, wanting to steal food from the pigs, it just doesn't quite translate, and it's easy to misunderstand. It's easy to misunderstand if we view this in terms of physical poverty, right? And I think this is the distinction here. If we view this in terms of physical poverty, if you're not serving Jesus, then you're going to be like, whatever. Physical poverty, you're going to be like, even a lousy person kind of thing. Physical poverty, moral poverty, that kind of thing. But what if we view this in terms of spiritual poverty? Do you remember maybe, I don't know, was it maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago, I forget. We redefined poverty, not just in a lack of material things, but social poverty, spiritual poverty. Remember we did that whole series? But anyways, but if we view this in terms of spiritual poverty, so for those who don't have a loving, life-changing relationship with Jesus, like there's a spiritual poverty there where you're missing out on this amazing, like I said, life-changing relationship with Jesus. So I'm going to move over that quickly, but I just wanted to kind of point that out, that it's easy to misunderstand if we view in terms of physical poverty or even moral poverty, because a lot of people I know who are not followers of Jesus, they're good, good, solid human beings, right? Okay, so on Sunday when we get together, I'm going to ask you, what do you think of this story? What stands out to you? And we'll have a conversation about it. So, before we do, can I just share a couple of thoughts with you? There are 3 things that stand out to me in this story. The first thing is the Father's love. This story is called, in my Bible and in your Bible, this story is commonly referred to as the prodigal son, right? The focus in the title is on the son. But really, this story is about the prodigal's father. The father is the star of the story, right? And he's really the focus of the story, at least in Jesus's mind here. And the unconditional love that the father showed, to his son. In fact, the overarching theme for all 3 of these parables could be loving care, right? The shepherd, out of love, went and searched for the one lost sheep. This is the woman, out of love, this is an inanimate object, but went and searched for her coin. And then, of course, the father, out of love for his son, ran to, and I love what were the words? Filled with love and compassion. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son. I love that image. Friends, listen to me. There is no magnet stronger than genuine love. Do you hear me? There is no magnet stronger than genuine love. And this is an image of the Father's love for us. Yes, even sometimes when we fail, sometimes when we, don't behave the way that even we want to behave, or sometimes when life gets a little muddy and we're down in the mud, right? The Father's unconditional love for us, it does not change. And I love that image. Filled with love and compassion, the Father ran to his Son, right? But I think this is also an image for us, right? An image that we can reflect of the Father's unconditional love, that we would have unconditional love, for everybody, specifically for those who are not currently oriented towards Jesus, right? That we would just love, period, regardless of our differences, regardless of, how a person might live or how they might look or what they might think or believe. We just love, period, right? We love people. And I think that's a beautiful image for us that we see of the Father here that we can reflect. My second observation is that this story, this parable, is really about Jesus's mission to reach people who are not currently pointed towards him, oriented towards him, right? And again, the shepherd went out and searched for the sheep. The woman searched for the coin. The Father, in his unconditional love, went out and ran to, right? This story is really about the mission, Jesus's mission, right? And so the question that I have really for myself is, how can I reflect the mission of Jesus in my life today? So how could you remember these parables are all action oriented, right? The shepherd searched, the woman searched, the father ran. They're all action oriented. So how can I today, in my actions, live out Jesus's mission to reach people who are far from him? The third thing that I observe here, and I love this image again, is the joy in heaven. And we see this specifically in the first two. I mean, Jesus is right out there in the first two parables. There's greater joy in heaven, right? Or the angels are rejoicing, right? And the image carries forward with the party that the Father threw. And remember at the end in verse whatever, it said, let the verse 24, so the party began. And again, I just love that image, right? But friends, the joy in heaven, when somebody who is not oriented towards Jesus turns their heart toward him, right? And all of heaven rejoices. Let me just make one more quick observation. I'm running out of time here. But I think that this parable kind of, again, maybe easy to misunderstand, but the language in this parable would easily lead us to binary thinking, where you're either in or you're out. The sheep was lost, the sheep was found. The coin was lost, the coin was found. The son, went out in rebellion, the son came home. Binary thinking, you're either in or you're out. But, we talked about this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I forget exactly, but we talked about the fact that we all have some waywardness in us, right? We all have, prone to, what's the hymn? Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love, right? We all have some waywardness built within us. And so, there's this part of us, it's not an us and them. There's, when we orient our hearts towards Jesus, when we take steps towards Jesus, the Father runs to us in love, and there's a party in heaven when we take steps towards Jesus. So I don't want us to think in terms of, there's those bad people out there, those notorious sinners, like the religious leaders said. No, we're all kind of in there together. And some of us would identify as followers of Jesus and oriented ourselves towards Jesus. But, really there's some of that in all of us. Okay, so I need to wrap up. So if you're able to connect with us on Sunday at Latcham Hall, we look forward to seeing you, and we'll have a fantastic time together. Okay, friends, thanks for connecting with me. Have a great day.